Dr. Ivan Misner is the founder and chief visionary officer of BNI, the world's largest business networking organisation. Founded in 1985, the organisation now has over 10,000 chapters throughout every populated continent of the world. Last year alone, BNI generated 11.5 million referrals, resulting in more than $16.2 billion worth of business for its members. Called the father of modern networking by both Forbes and CNN, Dr. Misner is considered to be one of the world's leading experts on business networking and has been a keynote speaker for major corporations and associations throughout the world. Among his many awards, he has been named Humanitarian of the Year by the Red Cross and has been the recipient of the John C. Maxwell Leadership Award, as well as writing lots of awesome books. Hello and welcome to Talk Business with Ivan.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Ivan, we all know you for BNI, but what did you do before founding BNI?
So I was a management consultant before I started BNI. I helped people with hiring, training employees, policy procedure manuals, strategic planning. And that's really what led me to starting BNI. I was looking for referrals for my consulting practice, and I put together one group. I only wanted one group. But what happened was people came, we take only one person per profession in our chapter. And so, someone came and said, gee, this is fantastic. I love this, but I can't join. My profession's represented. Would you help me open up my own group? And David, I actually said no to her at first. I said, no, this isn't what I do. I'm a business consultant. I don't run a network. And she said, well, this is kind of consulting. You're helping me build my business. So I said, okay. And we ended up opening 20 chapters that year by accident. And it was at that point I realized that we don't teach this in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. And that I probably struck a chord that I hadn't expected. And that's when I created the plan to scale BNI.
Yeah.
It's now global.
What is networking and why should every business be actively engaged in this today?
So my definition of networking, and you can find it up on my blog, ivanmisner.com. There's a lot of free content up there. I've been blogging since 2007. So a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah.
Networking is the process of developing and using your contacts to increase your business, enhance your knowledge, expand your sphere of influence, or serve the community. So it's about turning contacts into connections and building relationships with people. I think that networking's more about farming than it is about hunting.
Yeah.
It's about getting to know people and build those relationships.
Yeah. Giver's gain has become arguably the two most famous words within BNI. Tell us about the history and heart behind this.
Yeah, so I realized early on, I had gone to a lot of networks that were just, they were mercenary. You know, you'd go there and everyone was trying to sell to you. I would leave some of these groups and I felt like I'd been slimed.
Yeah.
And I needed to go home and get a shower. And then I went to these other groups that were totally social. It was happy hour and hors d'oeuvres. And there was no business being done. And I didn't like either of those kinds of groups. I wanted a group that was focused on business, but wasn't mercenary. And a group that focused on people, but wasn't just totally social. It was more relational. And I realized that the glue that would hold that together is this idea of, if I help you, you'll help me, we'll all do better as a result of it. And that became the phrase giver's gain. I think that giver's gain is more than a phrase. It's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when it's applied properly, it'll change your life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world.
Yeah. BNI is the world's leading network and organization. What has been the secret sauce? What has separated BNI from all of the competition?
So culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture is the secret sauce of any highly successful organization. And it's the DNA of what makes a company the company that it is, both good or bad. And so I think the culture of the organization is really critical, starting with our principal core value of giver's gain. So I've written a little bit about this. How do you create culture? Because especially when you're a small business, how do you create culture? And here's how I think you create culture within an organization. You start with processes that you use in your business that work. So you look at the processes. Those processes become organizational traditions. Traditions are the things we talk about. You know, I learned that when I started this business, this happened. And so we then did that. And, you know, that's how we made this work. So processes become traditions. Traditions evolve into core values. Core values create culture.
Yeah.
The organization that lives its core values creates a healthy organizational culture. And I think that's the way. And some of that happens simultaneously. You might start with one or two core values, but the rest evolve as your traditions evolve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant stuff. You have met a lot of BNI members over the years, Ivan. What are some of the most common traits you've noticed in the most successful members?
So I've done multiple surveys over the years about what are the top characteristics of a great networker. And let me give you 5 of the top. One that I did not too long ago had, I think it was 3,400 respondents. Now, they weren't all BNI members, but people who believe in networking. And I asked them, what are the top traits of a great networker? And here are the top 5 traits from that survey of 3,400 people, which, by the way, you can also find the survey on ivanmisner.com. Number 1, first and foremost, a good listener. A good networker has 2 ears and 1 mouth, uses them both proportionately. Number 2 is positive attitude. People want to do business with people who have a positive and supportive attitude. Hence the philosophy of giver's gain. You got to be there to help other people. Number 3 is a willingness to help others and to be collaborative. Number 4 was to be sincere and authentic. That sincerity is, and I think sincerity is part of humility. You know, being sincere and authentic is a little bit about having some humility. I think that humble people don't think less of themselves. They just think of themselves less.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of sincerity. And number 5 was follows up. They follow up with the referrals that they give. Those are the top 4 characteristics from the survey of 3,400 people. And I think that certainly applies to good BNI members.
Yeah. What are the biggest mistakes people make when networking?
Well, they treat networking like a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. Hi, David, my name's Ivan. Let's do business. Yeah. And, you know, one of the things I teach in networking is the VCP process. Visibility, credibility, profitability. First, you have to be visible. People have to know who you are and what you do. Then you develop credibility, and the credibility piece of it takes time. You can't do that overnight, okay? That takes a little bit of time. So we go from visibility to credibility. Credibility is where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it. And then and only then can you get to profitability, where people know who you are, they know what you do, they know you're good at it, and they're willing to give you referrals on an ongoing reciprocal basis. And what tends to happen where people take this wrong is they try to jump over visibility. They try to jump over credibility, and they want to get right to profitability. And in one of my books, by the way, I call that premature solicitation, which you don't want to say fast 3 times, it'll get you in trouble. And so that's what happens, and that's where networking goes wrong. They have this disconnect, and they think it's about selling, when in fact it's really about relationship building.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of your favorite referral success stories over the last 36 years, Ivan?
So I could give you so many incredible success stories, but I want to give you a couple that are from the last year or two. During the middle of COVID. I mean, here we are in COVID 2020. I don't recall the statistics you gave, but we actually did about 16 billion US dollars worth of business during COVID. Yeah. What a crazy year. Yet we did 16 billion, and thank you for closed business, which what that means is our members referring business to each other. How much was that worth? And we know the number because they put it themselves into our system. Yeah. So that's a number based on our members' reports. And the 2 that stand out to me during the middle of COVID were 2 people that used their network to collaborate with each other and get ideas. The first was a furniture reupholstery shop in the United States, and she had to let go of all of her employees because it wasn't an essential business, furlough them. And and she was having a one-to-one with Zoom one-to-one with another BNI member. And the member said, "You have a lot of cloth in your shop, don't you?" And she said, "Well, I literally have tons of cloth." And he said, "Have you thought about making COVID masks?" Now, this was back in March, April.
Yeah.
And she said, "No, I hadn't." He said, why don't you look into making COVID masks?" So she made 100 masks, David, and she gave them to her BNI members and some friends. And she said, "I'm going to give you 2. One's for you. And would you take the other one and please give it to a healthcare worker, a nurse, a doctor, somebody at a hospital, a senior center. Give it to somebody and along with my card and tell them where they can get them." She was able, David, to hire back her entire staff.
Wow.
They physically distanced in the warehouse and they started making COVID masks. She not only saved her business, she thrived during the middle of COVID. And that's the power of a personal network and using that network. I'll give you a quicker one. In Australia, a brewery, it was basically all the bars were shut, so they were struggling. And in another one-to-one, a person said, "You have a lot of alcohol, don't you?" He said, "Yeah, a lot." And he said, "Have you thought about making hand sanitizer?" I said, "No." And so he went into the hand sanitizer business. And again, it saved his company. And so to me, what I love about those aren't the most successful. I mean, I've seen BNI members that we did a survey in the United Kingdom years back. In one little region of BNI, 6 millionaires, pound sterling millionaires, were created in that region through participation. So there have been bigger stories, but not, to me, those are 2 of the most meaningful I've ever heard.
Yeah, so good. Here we are 36 years later, 10,000 chapters across the world. What have been some of the biggest struggles you've had to overcome to get to this point, Ivan?
Yeah, well, the first one was the 10,000 mark, because 1986, middle of the year, I was talking to a friend and I said to him, I think someday BNI might actually be able to have 10,000 chapters.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, "And how many chapters do you have now?" I said, "Well, 30. And he said, "You have 30. I said, "Yeah. And you think you can have 10,000? I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Well, it's good to have goals. I've been very good to have goals." And I'm like, "No, really, I think it's possible to have 10,000 chapters."
Yeah.
David, last month, BNI crossed the 10,000 chapter mark.
Yeah.
10,000 chapters in more than 70 countries. I'll tell you the truth, I thought it would take longer. On my calculations, it would take about 70 years. I didn't think I would live to see us hit that mark, but I really knew it was possible. It happened in half the time I calculated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was my first big problem. Second biggest problem, long story, so I won't give it all to you, but it was getting everyone on board on one database management system.
Yeah.
That we call BNI Connect, because I made the mistake of thinking that, all these different regions of BNI were doing different database systems, and I thought a cream would rise to the top and the best would show itself. Man, was I wrong. What happened was they all became silos.
Yeah.
And everyone was willing to die on the hill to fight for their database management system. And so what I had to do was start from scratch and build one and get everybody on board with that one system, which was absolutely the most difficult and most expensive thing I've ever done in my career. And it was probably the smartest thing I ever did, because it brought us all together in a way that we just weren't before. I mean, just 10 years ago, everything was being done on paper.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. How has founding and leading this huge organization in BNI impacted your work-life balance? And what tips can you give our listeners?
Yeah, great question. So, David, would you like to know the secret?
Yes.
To balance? All right, here it is. You ready? Forget about balance. You'll never have it. Now, when I tell that to an audience, there's always somebody in the front row that's like, oh, God, I thought I was going to get something good. All right, I think you're going to get something good. Here's, although I don't think you can have balance, you can have something else. Tell me if you think this makes sense. Balance, we look at balance like scales. And our personal life has to be in balance with our professional life, which has to be in balance with our health, which has to be in balance with our spirituality. And it's this one big balancing act. I think life, especially for entrepreneurs, is more of a juggling act than a balancing act. And I really don't know that balance is what we should be looking at. Instead of balance, I think we need to consider harmony. And harmony is more than semantics. Even the graphic for harmony, the yin and the yang, are out of balance if you separate them. But together you create a life of harmony. So how do you create a life of harmony versus balance? I talk about this in one of my books. If you like this concept, take a look at the book, Who's in Your Room? Who's in Your Room? The Secret of Creating Your Best Life. And one of the last chapters, we talk in there about creating harmony. And here are 2 or 3 techniques that we give to create a life of harmony. First, just a handful of simple words, really simple words. Be here now. Be here now. Wherever you are, be present to that. Don't be at home thinking about the fact that you didn't spend time with the family last night. I'm sorry. Don't be at work thinking about the fact that you didn't spend time with the family last night. Don't be at home thinking about that work project that you got to do. Wherever you are, be present to that moment. Now, nobody's perfect at that. I wasn't perfect at it. But I got to be pretty darn good at learning how to be present to wherever I was at that moment. And I talk about a number of techniques and some stories in there about how I did that and how I think other people can do that. Be present, be fully there. I remember my son and I playing, we were playing Halo. He's 26 now. This is when he was 17. And we're in front of this giant TV in my living room, and we're playing Halo, and he's kicking my butt playing Halo. And we were leveling up to the next level. And while we were leveling up, I said to him, hey, buddy, was I around enough for you as you grew up? And he's like, what? I said, was I around enough? He says, you're around all the time. I'm like, well, I travel about every other week. But David, I have 2.3 million miles on one airline. Okay. So I said, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm gone for at least a few days every other week. He said, yeah, I know you travel. He said, but I don't know. It's like whenever you're here, you're here. Yeah. Can we get back to the game now? And I'm like, yes, we can. We can get back to the game now. And so to me, that's a great example of a be here now. Here's another one. You must learn how to both hold on and let go, which sounds like a paradox. But you have to learn what things are important to hold on to and what things are okay to let go of. So in the book, Who's in Your Room, we talk about your values. You got to get good with your values. When I talk to people about their personal values, if I were to say to someone, I'm not going to do this to you, David, but if I was to say to somebody, give me your top 6 personal values, it's like looking at somebody with the deer in the headlights. Yeah. It's like, 6? Yeah. And they can't give them to you. Well, if you don't know your values, you don't know what's important to you in life. If you aren't really clear about your values, you don't know what's important in your life. And that's a core element of Who's in Your Room. It's about the people you surround yourself with. And so what you do is you get good with your values, and then you hold on to those with dear life. Everything you do in business and in life has got to be to move forward with your values. What do you let go of? You let go of everything that doesn't connect with your values.
Yeah.
It may be important to someone else, but somebody else, what somebody else is doing might be important to them, but it's a distraction for you. It's not related to your core values. And so that's two. Here's a third one. Create margins in life. Just like the margins in a book where there's space, you have to create space in your life. You have to take time off.
Yeah.
You have to have those margins, those areas where you can center yourself, be present, enjoy that life. You're doing hard work, enjoy the life that you have. And that was a lesson that my wife shared with me, my late wife shared with me, the importance of having margins. And we talked about it early in our marriage. We were married 31 years before she passed away. We talked about it a great deal. And it's one of the many principles of creating harmony. My life, David, was out of balance, but most of my life had harmony.
Yeah.
When I traveled, I was out of balance. I was traveling.
Yeah.
But when I was at home, I was out of balance.
Yeah.
I was at home.
Yeah.
And from that, I created what I like to think of as a reasonably successful life of harmony.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Exceeded expectations. And I've got to say, thank you for not putting me on the spot there, Ivan, and asking me to mention my top 6. And
so, all right, I'm going to put you on the spot for this, and I think it'll be easy. We discovered that when you ask people their values, they freeze. But when you ask people what are their deal killers, what is something, a behavior in someone that you just won't tolerate, it's just not acceptable, they come up with it right now. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you, what's one of your deal killers in a relationship, professional or personal relationship?
Untrustworthiness, people that don't tell the truth. I think that's really hard to work with.
Absolutely, and that's a good one. And so when I redo the book, I'm going to actually flip it, because I start with values and then I talk about deal killers, and we're going to do a second edition of the book. I'm going to start with deal killers, because what we discovered was virtually everyone can tell me a deal killer right now, and they can give me a second one and a third one and a fourth one pretty quickly. They have a hard time with values. So what I recommend is for people to think about their deal killers, and from their deal killers, then create their values. And you can go online. There are a lot of tests online. Who's in Your Room's got a simple instrument that you can use to help you determine your values. And you got to get good with it. If you don't know your values, you're going to surround yourself with people who don't belong in your room.
Yeah. We're going to make sure that we put links to all of your books, and Who's in Your Room will be in the description below. So make sure that you check out Ivan's books in that description. Ivan, how do you keep yourself motivated? You've written a great number of books. You've built this fantastic organization. You've made lots of money. What keeps you hungry?
Yeah, well, you know what? Honestly, it's not the money. I mean, I like making money. The money's good, but for me, it's about what difference am I making for people? You know, we all have people who are in our story. I could tell you stories about people who changed my life. Yeah. They changed my life. And those are meaningful. They're mostly meaningful to me, but they're meaningful. I think the real question that we should be asking ourselves, after we recognize who's in our story, we need to be asking ourselves, whose story are we in? Whose life have we changed? What difference have we made in the world? And you don't always, I'm a real believer that you don't have to make a world of difference, but you can make a difference in the world. Yeah. And you do that one person at a time. Yeah. One relationship at a time. And so that's what motivates me, is making a difference for people. And I do that by working in my flame and not in my wax. Let me explain that. When you're in your flame, you're on fire, you're excited, you love what you're doing. People can see it in the way you behave, they can hear it in your voice. And when you're in your wax, it takes all your energy away. They can see that in the way you behave, and they can hear that in your voice. By the way, David, this is my flame. I love I love doing interviews. I love writing. I love pouring into people. And so I made a decision years ago to really strive to be at a point in my career that I could be working virtually all the time in my flame, and not in my wax. And it took me a long time to get there, because sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get to do what you want to do. But I got there. And I think that's what keeps me motivated, is every day I work in my flame.
How important is succession planning to an organization like BNI, and how do you develop your future leaders to get to a point when they can become the new Ivan Misner?
Yeah, so I think that's important. That latter point is important, and I would tell you, you don't have to become the new Ivan Misner. You could be better than the Ivan Misner. There are things. Look, one of the things about being a successful entrepreneur is to know what you're good at and know what you're not good at, and bring people in who are better than you at doing certain things. There are certain things I think I'm pretty good at. But there are so many things that other people are better at. And so it's really about working, I think leadership is about creating leadership. Being a great leader is about growing other leaders. And so I think that's such an important part. And in BNI, we have a leadership program for our staff where they apply, and when accepted, they get additional training and leadership. They get to travel the world in a non-COVID year. They get to travel the world and meet other cultures and get, like I said, additional training on leadership. I think it's important. Now, succession planning is a different issue, and I've certainly started that process. I brought in partners into BNI. I no longer run the day-to-day operations of BNI. I'm the Colonel Sanders of BNI now. I get to be the spokesperson, basically. And I think succession planning is important. If you don't plan your succession, life will plan it for you. And it might not be what you want, and it might not be what your employees want, and it might not be what your customers want. And so you have to have succession planning. Mine involved bringing in partners and allowing me to do what I was most passionate about, to work in my flame and not in my wax. It might be different for others, but that was mine.
Touching on training, you've always been passionate about self-development. What have been some of the most helpful resources you have used to help you grow?
Well, look, as a young man, I didn't have YouTube or podcasts, so it was radio shows that I enjoyed. It was books and cassette tapes, Nightingale, Conant cassette tapes and books. I remember the very first cassette tape I listened to, I was 16. And it was first self-development cassette tape. It was a cassette tape given to me by someone in my story, Art Hyatt, my football coach. He gave all of us this cassette. Okay, it was a bootleg cassette. I don't want to get him in trouble, but it was a copy of his cassette. And he gave all of the football team this cassette tape called Psycho-Cybernetics, about the power of positive thinking. It was written by Maxwell Maltz. I read that when I was 16 years old, or listened to it. I went out and bought the book afterwards so that I didn't want the Reader's Digest version of the one cassette. I wanted it all. And I read the book, and it absolutely changed my life. It was the beginning of a transition for me to really understand the power of positive thinking and the importance of spending time in thought, because what we put in our head is critical. The things we think about are critical, and they can be life-changing. And so it was incredible. I've said incredible too many times. It was life-changing for me, and that's what got me, I think, started on the road of reading self-help books and eventually writing one, Who's in the Room. And now today it's YouTube. I think we have so much. We have podcasts and recordings like this. We have videos that we can watch, books, audio, Audible. There's just so much out there. It's important to find mentors, virtual mentors. I had virtual mentors when I was a young person. They were books and cassettes.
Yeah.
There are more virtual mentors now. Find a virtual mentor who resonates with you and follow them, because I think that can change your life as well.
Yeah.
The listeners.
Yeah. If somebody was listening to you talk today, Ivan, and they were on the fence about going to visit a BNI chapter, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say visit BNI chapters and make sure that there's a good connection, that you feel good about the people that are in that room. I used to be really good at convincing people to join BNI. I don't try to convince anyone really to join BNI anymore, because I would convince people and they would join and they weren't highly committed and they failed.
Yeah.
You gotta want to do BNI.
Yeah.
You gotta want it. Now you can't want it until you go see it and experience it. So I would say go see it and experience it. And if it's not a good experience, go to a second group, because there will be a group near you that you will go to and you'll go, wow, this is incredible. I'll be shocked if you don't hear at least once at that meeting someone use the phrase giver's gain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be disappointed if you don't see a lot of giving there, if you don't see a lot of positive attitude. So I would say go, visit, experience it, find a group that resonates with you, and join.
Yeah.
I think BNI is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear. Mm-hmm. We live in fearful times. Mm-hmm. This is the most challenging time I have ever seen in my professional career. And yet, we generated $16 billion worth of business for our members in these fearful times. December 2020, we actually generated more referrals for our members than we did in December 2019. And so when I say BNI is a beacon of hope in a sea of fear, I mean it.
Yeah.
It's making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
But you got to go and understand that you got to work it. Yeah. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It takes effort. Yeah. But how cool is it? Effort building relationships.
Yeah.
I love it.
Ivan, the last half an hour has absolutely flown by. I'm so thankful for your time and for the work that you've done to create BNI to be what it is today. Myself and many of my friends at our chapter have benefited massively. It's changed many of our lives. So we are very, very thankful for you, and thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate it. Can I leave you with one last thought?
Yeah, please. I was going to ask you, do you have any closing thoughts? And also make sure that you tell people what the best way is for people to follow you as well, Ivan.
Yeah, so the best way to follow me, ivanmisner.com. I literally have 14 years of blogs, all free content up there. So ivanmisner.com. I'm on all the social media. You can go to almost any social media. You'll find me. It's usually Ivan Misner. I think Instagram is Dr. Ivan Misner. On Facebook, it's probably I have the most followers there, around 170,000 followers on my public Facebook page, which is facebook.com/IvanMisner.BNI Founder. So go connect with me there. I put up lots of free content. I'm all about education. I think education is the great equalizer in the world. It is the thing that makes us all equal. I grew up in a very, very blue collar working class community and family. I was the first person in my entire family, not just local family, my broader family, to get a college degree. I think it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm a believer in education. So my social media is heavily on educational content.
Yeah.
And you'll see it there. So go to any one of those. My closing thoughts are that networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. That it's about cultivating relationships with other people. You know the old saying, David, it's not what you know, it's who you know? I don't think it's either. I don't think it's what you know or who you know. It's how well you know each other that really counts. It's not just who's in your database. It's who's in your database. Who can, if you picked up the phone, who could you call and ask for a favor? Ask for help. And would that person even take your call? Yeah. And if they took it and you asked them for the favor, would they be willing to do it or at least consider it? If you ask them for help, would they be willing to consider it? That is what a powerful personal network is. And that is what I tried to create in BNI.
Yeah, wonderful.
And of course, can I just say BNI.com?
Yeah.
Go to BNI.com. If you're interested in a chapter near you, I almost forgot to say that. Sorry. Thanks.
Of course. Well, we're going to make sure that we've got the links to your books, your social media, and obviously BNI.com, all in the description below. Ivan, thanks again so much for your time. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, David, you had great questions. I do interviews. I do over 200 interviews a year, and you had some of the best questions today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.